Why did you become a FNaFb dev?
I've been doing some stuff with RPG Maker before and I felt inspired by the series as a whole. So at first, I was mostly modding some of the already existing games. Mostly for myself. Oh, and I made a game for the Blue Doctor. It wasn't that great. Eventually I became a dev for the FNaFb team and did absolutely nothing. I had many ideas, but didn't have the drive to realize them. Though by the point I could have, I've already left the team, with the whole team slowly being liquidated. Then I began modding PA, with moderate success. I wouldn't say it's my proudest work and I could have probably done better. Then I tried to make an original follow-up, but it immediately got shot down, since it was too much of a Herculean task for me. Then Ashton suggested I should make a game about Molten Freddy, so I got to work and mfcv was born. Since I made it in the style of GFDS with the night system, I could evenly space out my playtesting time, and it worked wonders. Though nowadays I don't look very highly upon the game due to some strange design choices. Let's just leave it at that. But ever since then, I've been making some more game and I want to continue making FNaFb games, until I feel like I've exhausted my FNaFb juices.
Do you have any advice for newbie devs?
Playtest your games regularly. Also, when you're starting out, preferably start small at first. Don't go too haywire right out of the gate, since one can easily burn out from that. And if you need any help, there's plenty of people to ask. Also, for the love of God, don't put in any tasteless jokes. I've seen too many newbie devs do it and it's making me shudder.
Explain your work process from start to finish.
First I get an idea, then I immediately make a title screen for it, which will probably sit in a designated folder for some time. If I get the drive to work on a game, first thing I do is establish the database. So making actors first, making their skills and stuff like that. Also import the necessary items for the game, though in a designated FNaFb template, they would already be there. And then I start just back in the game and add things as I go along. First thing I make is the maps, and then add the events and such later. From there I add the assets I need and spend some time flashing the game out. I would playtest the game every now and then to see if everything works, fixes some bugs or oversights, balance the game accordingly, and so on and so forth. I could go on for a long while. The starting process of it all is always the hardest part, but once I get the ball rolling, it's smooth sailing from there. I could go on for a long while, so take this as like a rough idea of my development process.
How did you end up helping work on Phantom Apparition?
I was elected as one of the playtesters. I would play the game for Ashton, give him some feedback and stuff, and tell him if stuff works or not. Reports bugs, if there are any, and yeah, that's the gist of it. Nothing more to add really.
What made you want to finish Phantom Apparition?
To be honest, I was kinda bored and then I thought to myself, hey, what if I managed to finish PA and patched up the game and give it an appropriate end? So I got to work. I've mostly just nerfed a lot of some of the early game bosses, maybe a bit too much in hindsight, and added some other stuff to it, most of which is probably arbitrary and can easily be skipped. One of the major additions I made was make my Silver Freddy be part of the story, and honestly, I regret it now. He doesn't really add much and is mostly just a horndog throughout the entire thing. I don't think I'll write the stuff I did for him ever again in any other FNaFb games, especially because of certain events. But that's all in the past now. Did I do a good job? Absolutely not. I'd say the only good part of the game is the extended tournament arc you can experience with one of the new Q items I added. Other than that, blag. Slup, all across the board. I do not recommend playing my PA extension. Save your time for the many better games out there.
How did Silver Freddy come into fruition?
It's hard to explain. It was mostly just an idea that was popping into my head. Then, I wrote his life story in a new defunct FNaFb Fangames Reddit. Some fellas showed interest at least. But now looking back at it, I'm afraid to even locate that old post I made. It's so cringe. I do not want to go back to that atrocity. Yeah, basically, he was a horndog, a bit one at that, to my absolute regrets nowadays. I think, if I ever were to include him in another fan game, I would probably tone down his traits, because of, let's just say, I couldn't really control myself back then, so yeah. Take from that what you will. Silver Freddy is one of my biggest regrets in my FNaFb career. But if I ever were to rehash him, he's not gonna be as problematic. I promise.
How did you come up with the Five Nights at the Boys, the best?
It's really stupid. Basically, in a now defunct server, I made a crude drawing of Freddy Futboy and thought nothing much of it. Eventually one day I would stumble upon Vinicius Joel's Barbecue Quest game, BBQ Quest for short, and I had this stupid idea, where I wanted to make a FNaFb game in that game's style, so I got to work. Work went pretty smoothly. It was mostly an extension of a relic scenario from mfcv, from which the game is heavily based on. During development, Ashton proposed the idea of Eve to me, and while I wanted to do so much more with the game, I basically just rushed to the end, since I didn't want to keep him waiting for too long and the idea of a collab game intrigued me. So I decided to save the ideas I still had for FNAF for the potential sequel. Yeah, that's about it.
Why did FNaFb short end up being made?
One day, I was watching through the Blue Doctor's FNaFb catalog. I watched the videos, where he would play a very old FNaFb game with BB being the FNaFb character. Since that game is basically unobtainable now, due to its page being nuked, I decided to make my own take on the game. I'd say it's not my best work by all means, but it's passable. It was also made during one of the first FNaFb Gamma Jams, making the first time I would use that base for a game. And it's also the reason why BB has a toss adjacent skill, since that was a requirement for that jam. I kinda loosely tied the game to my other games, which probably makes things very convoluted and confusing, but that was not a concern of mine. Also, I think I also just kinda rushed the game out, since the playtester section in the credits says bad. Yeah. Another one of my not so good works.
Do you ever plan making more FNaF Shorts games?
I'm not sure. I definitely want to, but I'd have to get a really good idea for one first. I was thinking about a game about Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, which could basically be my own take on Golden Edition, adding some of my own flair to it. But as of right now, I don't have any plans for one, but I definitely would want to make a shorter game down the line, if the time and drive is there.
Why was BBQ made?
Okay, this is gonna be really stupid. Basically my friend Kira was joking around with the character Burno saying what if Axel made a Burno game. And I took them up on that, making a goofy title screen and getting to work. The game was also made, because at the time, me and an old friend group of mine were not too thrilled about CPM Damnation, and how it ended with the Abyssal Demon Quartet taking over Jin Sakayo. One was suggesting that Yukari would have not been as easily beaten by Gridjali. So I took that as my base for the overall storyline of the game, where instead of Cerno getting knocked out for good by Gridjali, she would instead be brought to hell, where Skeletor would give her a second chance of sorts. From there it basically becomes like a what if scenario, where I just kinda go what if Abyss didn't take over Jin Sakayo and they actually managed to fight back, and also the question of what the more edgy Gridjali would do if she actually lost to those she was supposed to eliminate, culminating in the finale, where she basically turns into Dr. Andinitz from the Earthbound Halloween Heck. Some people frown upon the slur usage, but to me it's part of the reference, so I'm probably not gonna change that. Or maybe I will. Given the current reception of my games, I may as well have to. Only regret on that is that I didn't properly make Gridjali use her equivalent of Psy Bitch Kill. Definitely could have been done better. But yeah, that's basically the gist of the game, and why it was made.
If you could make a final mix of sort for BBQ, what would it be?
Basically, I would probably add a bit more bonus content to the game, since I think the game is heavily lacking in that. Maybe some other stuff as well, like more equips, since you're mostly limited to all the basic stuff. And maybe tone down the Fredmon jokes, since people seem to be very vocal about how tasteless they are. Or I'll just remove them entirely and replace them with something else.
Is there any one of your games you plan to revisit via a remake/continuation such as Barbecue?
Absolutely. As I've stated recently, I plan to completely remake mfcv from the ground up, making the code less spaghetti-like and removing some of the tasteless jokes. I'll probably start by just rehashing the general main game, since I've learned that adding bonus content in between is never a good idea. So that'll be my process for that. I'm also planning on maybe giving BBQ a bit of a glow-up, which will include all the stuff mentioned in the previous question. As for continuations, I have a sequel for mfcv planned. It's currently just in its conception phase, since I've mostly been doing other stuff, but I do want to make that a thing eventually. I also have a sequel for BBQ planned, but my friend Gapyalke suggested to me to put the mfcv2 and BBQ2 all in one game, which I think is a neat idea. The BBQ2 stuff could serve as a good B-plot, similar to the Gridchowy sections in Eve. So yeah, that's been on my mind in terms of remakes and continuations.
How has it been working with other developers on collab projects?
I've learned that I'm probably not cut out for collab projects, to be honest, but I will still try my best regardless, when the offer is made. When I worked on Eve with Ashton, there's a lot of things that I did that I regret. We got into some arguments and fights that I'd rather not think back on. And I'm probably the main reason the game took as long as it did, with me just leaving the collab mid-through, twice may I add, and me eventually just slowly losing motivation as the game got bigger. But I still wanted to finish what I started. With Thuckyland, it was Gapyalke proposing the idea of the two of us collabing together for the previous Gamagem. I was apprehensive at first, but I just wanted to see how it would go. It was very hectic, stressful, and led to some events I'd rather not think back on. Do you see a pattern? The game got released, and almost immediately bombed due to some balancing quirks and general confusing game design choices. We were very experimental with the game, but I guess people don't like it when devs experiment. Had to learn that the hard way. Eventually the balance patch rolled around and things got better. Right now we are working on the post-jam release, or rather, Yalke is, since I've been taking a bit of a backseat, since I didn't feel so well after the initial reception. And I do feel bad, since he's doing all the work, but he's always telling me that he doesn't mind. But I feel like I'm barely contributing anymore. But Alaska, I guess it's a pill I just have to swallow for now. Maybe one day when Thuckyland 2 is in development, I'll be a better collab partner. Hopefully.
Why did you and Ashy start making Eve?
It was mostly Ashy's idea, since he really wanted to work on a game for me, and I was interested at first. But slowly I realized that I was just not cut out for it, and eventually the game was cancelled, though nowadays I'd say we put it on hiatus, but eventually we picked it back up again. Progress was steady, especially on Ashy's side, who really went to town with Night 4, to the point where I kinda had to stop him from adding so much content, since I was really afraid of the content bloat. Overall, I think the general gist was to make a game that would talk mfcv, and I think we succeeded, though I'd say it doesn't take much to one-up mfcv. Game is really huge and people love it. And I think that's all that matters.
What was your favorite aspect of making Eve?
Probably the entirety of Magicant and Dark Magicant. I really wanted to lean in on Ennard's psyche on that one, and I think I nailed it. There's some hiccups, but I feel like they are relatively minor. Though I'd say using the Roblox winning smile in that one part in Dark Magicant probably wasn't the greatest idea. But hey, you live and learn. Another one of my favorite parts was probably the finale of the Dark Route. The Dungeon of Experience, the final fights against Satori and Nightmare, I'd say are my favorite part of the Dark Route for me. Also the fact where you can, almost, kill everything you can interact with, since I really wanted to lean into how far gone Ennard has become.
What was your least favorite aspect of making Eve?
It's really hard to say. I probably really don't have one. Though I'd say there was a point where Ashy wanted me to make more content for Night 4, and I really did not want to do that, since we already made so much content for that, and I just wanted to move on to the later parts of the game. But aside from that, the game was a wild ride. In a good way. There was some bumps on the road, but we got past them.
Is there any scrapped content?
For those who remember one of the earliest demos of the game, you may remember that after the Freddy scenario, you could go into the Christmas market and get some stuff there. That includes Lefty as a party member, the edgy one, and the whole dungeon behind the market, which you could go into and witness the Puppet Rangers being clones, with the addition of the golden avatar smiting you. Also a plush trap dream sequence, which was also taken out of the game. At one point in Night 3, I wanted you to be able to go to Abyss and challenge the Demon Quartet and the Champion Booty, who would tell you some interesting tidbits about Nightmare's plan, but I shelved that plan and later reused bits of it in mfcv. I also recall that the broadcast station in the city was supposed to have way more content, but I think that got shelved too. Though I may be wrong. Other than that, there's not much else to my memory.
If you had the time and or motivation to update EVE, what would you change in terms of gameplay/story?
There's a good few changes I would make. Mainly balance-wise. And maybe I'd also redo some of the boss mobsets to make them more unique and stuff. Sunlord is gonna stay, as is Domeo. I'd also probably sift, though, the files and see what I could add where, since there's also a lot of scrapped stuff on Ashton's side that didn't make it into the final game. I would at least try and see where I could make room for that. Though other than that, I'd keep the changes rather minuscule. Also don't count on new content. Eve is a big boy, and I ain't feeding him more.
Do you have any unreleased/scrapped games you plan on finishing?
Not really. There's a lot of game ideas I have written down, which either will or won't be made. If anything, maybe I could make a newer and improved version of the shitty boss simulator, only OGs will know. But other than that, I don't really have anything else.
Do you have a particular game or developer who inspired you?
I think my main inspirations are Rocky Tokaz and Sibyllus. But also some of my good friends like Ashton and the entirety of Team Dark Patrol. These guys keep me going and make me motivated to work on stuff. I hope I can make more good game for them, and I hope to also learn from them as a FNaFb myself.